27th, 2021, and we're going to begin the Orientation to the Law Library Collections webinar. We'd like to start with a couple of housekeeping notes. One is that we ask you submit your questions via the chat feature. If your chat feature isn't automatically open, please look to the row of buttons at the bottom of your WebEx window and click on the button on the right-hand side that looks like a little cartoon bubble. That should open up the chat box on the side. If you're having trouble with your computer audio, we suggest using the call-in feature. To find this feature, again, look at the buttons at the bottom of your screen and choose the button that looks like 3 dots, more options at the bottom of your WebEx window, and select the audio connection or switch audio. After the webinar, we'll attempt to make the slides available via WebEx file transfer, but if you have any difficulty downloading the slides, please send a request for the slides in using our Ask a Librarian online form. And as a bit of personal housekeeping, I'm going to say if at any point during the webinar I say, please get down off the table, I'm not speaking to you, I'm speaking to my cats who, for some reason or other, always like to join in when I'm teaching online. So let's go ahead and begin with information on the orientation to the Law Library Collections. So the Library of Congress it's the oldest cultural institution in the United States, and it was established in 1800. And then in 1832, the Law Library was separately established as a department of the Library of Congress. It was established to serve the legal research needs of all 3 branches of government. And in fact, the law which established it opened it to the President, the Vice President, members of Congress, the justices of the Supreme Court, and members of the bar who practice before the Supreme Court. The law also noted that the room in which the law library was to exist should be close to the chamber where the library itself was. And I want to remind you, of course, that at this time, we were all in the Capitol. There isn't a separate building for the Library of Congress until the Jefferson Building was built in 1897. And then the other 2 buildings for the library, the Adams and the Madison, were built, Adams in the 30s and the Madison in the late 1970s. So when the library and the law library were established, we were in the Capitol itself, and members of Congress could just come in and browse the collections. Today, the law library is the largest law library in the world. We have got approximately 2.9 million volumes of federal, state, and foreign materials, including codes, constitutions, official gazettes, law reports, treatises is kind of a fancy word for books, legal books, serials, and laws from all historical periods. We cover material from some 267 nations and jurisdictions in 140 languages. And I'd note that one of the reasons our collection is so large is that we don't weed out older material. So, for example, we have laws and constitutions and codes from the former Soviet republics. Even though those countries no longer exist, we've gone ahead and kept those materials. Our Law Library Reading Room, which is in the Madison Building, has a working reference collection of about 30,000 volumes. One thing I need to note at this point, and I'll note a couple of times throughout the presentation, is that we're going to emphasize our online resources at this time, and we're also going to emphasize several times about our availability through Ask a Librarian. At this time, the library's reading rooms are still closed to the public. There is one special room, an electronic resource room, where members of the public can come in by appointment if you are local and access at least some of the library's subscription databases at this time. But the general research centers and reading rooms at the Library of Congress are still closed to the public. So the Public Services Division, of which I am a member, staffs the reading room, and we are staffing it online. We're providing research assistance. But when we're open, we staff it, and you can see a picture there of the reference desk and I think 1 or 2 of my colleagues. And we go ahead and provide assistance regarding U.S. legal and legislative research. When the library is open, we're available to the public from 8:30 to 5 p.m. Mondays through Saturdays. As you'll see, the slide lists a phone number. At this point, we're not staffing that phone line, so that we ask people send in all their questions through Ask a Librarian, and we'll go ahead and be able to answer those. The Ask a Librarian does say 5 business days to answer, but most of the time we're able to respond more quickly than that. As well as the Public Services Division, which staffs the reading room, the Law Library has a Foreign and Comparative Law Division, which is staffed by foreign law experts who provide research and reference assistance on non-U.S. law. They also help build the library's foreign law collections, and there's a link with some information about that. They prepare comparative law reports for Congress, many of which can be found at LOC.gov current topics. And we're going to be looking at all of these pages as we go through the presentation. And they also provide expert testimony in congressional hearings, and they draft articles regarding foreign legal developments for the Global Legal Monitor. The Foreign legal specialist can be reached through the reference desk, or at this point, by submitting a question through Ask a Librarian. We then forward it to staff, and it will be assigned to one of the foreign law experts. I would note, by the way, that the foreign law specialists actually cover countries based on language and not on civil versus common law, for example. So our French legal specialist covers France, French-speaking countries in the Caribbean, French-speaking countries in Africa, and for example, if someone should ask for information on Vietnam while it was a French colony and the material was in French, we would consult him. So the specialists are based not on type of law, but on language expertise. They do have degrees in law from their primary countries, as well as usually masters in law from an American university. So we've got people who help you find the law for the United States and for foreign jurisdictions. We also have a Global Legal Collection Directorate, and they are one of the most important parts of the Law Library because without them, we really wouldn't have the materials we use. They help collect, acquire, and maintain our holdings, both print and digital. They work in stacks, which are the closed stacks where most of our 2.9 million items reside. They oversee the Law Library's rare materials collection, which is about 50 to 60,000 volumes of rare legal materials. And they also are part of our Digital Resources Division, which helps us with digitizing and making available more and more material that for you to find online. One of the best ways to explore the library is through the library's online catalog, catalog.loc.gov. However, let me start by saying, contrary to popular opinion, we do not have a copy of every book published in the United States. We simply don't have room. Each division of the library does have collection policies which guide us in acquiring material. However, we do have a great deal. As I said earlier, we are the largest law library in the world, so using the catalog to explore our collections is a very good place to start. We generally advise using the advanced search option with the catalog. This is because, unlike Google, the catalog's browse search isn't forgiving. We're hoping in a few years when we upgrade the catalog that it will have greater flexibility, but at this time, if you put a title into the browse option, it reads it literally. So if, for example, you're searching for constitutional law for the scholar, and the title is actually constitutional law from scholars, the browse option won't find that. In the advanced search option, you can break down the elements of the title and put them into the search boxes. You can include, say you have the author's last name but not the first name. You can include that. You can include subject terms. You can also use search limits in the advanced option, which can help you limit your search as well. And there are a number of different search options, including language and also date, which can be used. So once you've searched for and retrieved a catalog record for an item, you're going to be presented with a certain amount of information. First of all, it's going to let you know if an item is available. So there's an item availability button that appears at the top of the record, and you can click on that and see information about the item's availability. If the call number in the availability includes an RR or an RR desk, it's going to mean that it is physically in the reading room. If it doesn't include that RR or RR desk, it's going to be in our closed stacks, and there would be a process for requesting it when we are open. When we are open, you would then click the Request This Item link, and you'd be able to go ahead and request the item once you have a Library of Congress Reader Registration Card and have set up a password for your account. Generally, when we're open, requests take about 45 minutes to fill. The nice thing about getting a card when you visit DC is that once you have it, you can go ahead and request books the day before you come in so that they're waiting for you to do your research. As I mentioned, we've got a rare book collection, so that information is also going to appear in a catalog record for a rare book. There are a couple of ways this will appear. It may say rare book. For the request and information, it may also refer to a specialized collection. In this case, it's the Blackstone collection, but the request in says rare book. So that's a way to know that you need to request it from the rare book curator, Nathan Dorn. His email address is here on the slide. There's also a link to his address and more information about the rare books on this page of the library's website. The other thing I'm going to advise is that there is an LC permalink. We're going to talk about links in catalog records a little more, but this is important to include when you're making a request to Nathan, so he sees exactly what you're looking for. Other links on records may include a link to a digital version of the item, and those will appear above the LC permalink, which is shorthand for a link to the catalog record, but above that you may have a link to an electronic version of an item. Generally, materials for which there will be digital versions in the catalog will be older materials which are not subject to copyright, and or may also be government documents which are generally not copyrighted under U.S. law. So you would find links to the Government Publishing Office, to our Older American Memory Project, and also to Hathi Trust, which is a consortium between the Library of Congress and academic libraries, which has digitized a great many government publications from the 19th century forward, and is a resource we refer patrons to frequently. So we've talked a little about how to find books in the library, but sadly we're not open, so we can't get to them. So we want to talk some about what is available through our website. And here are some of the materials that are available. This is just a list. We're going to look at our homepage in a minute and some of the other pages, but here are some of the subpages, which include information on the Legal Research Institute, where these classes are set up and information about the classes is made available. Databases and eResources, so these are going to be specifically about legal databases and eResources patrons can use. The Guide to Law Online, which is an excellent portal that we use frequently to help people locate laws in their state or regulations, or laws and regulations in a foreign country. Research and reports and legal topics, which will include material provided by staff, including the foreign legal specialists. The Global Legal Monitor, which we're going to get into, but includes short articles by the foreign legal specialists. In Custodia Legis, which is our blog, and is another good resource for information about library collections, legal events, legal history, and I recommend highly to anybody who has children who may be doing National History Day. And finally, Congress.gov, which is our legislative database and is one of my favorite websites personally. So here is a snapshot of our homepage. You'll see at the top Library of Congress homepage with the address law.gov. At the top of every page, every law library page, you will see 3 boxes. One is Ask a Librarian. So we've provided the address to Ask a Librarian here in the slides. I believe Barbara will include it in the chat box. But there is a button for Ask a Librarian on every one of the law library's pages so that you can always ask it and submit a question wherever you are or whatever the question is. There is a link to digital collections. These are going to be the library's digital collections. So it's a larger universe than the legal digital materials. For those, you probably want to rely on our databases and resources. But if you'd like to go out to the library's larger collection, you can do that. And then finally, a link to the library's catalog. And again, all 3 of these buttons appear on every one of the law library's pages. So you can always go to those resources from wherever you are. Looking a little further down on the page, on the left-hand side, we've gone ahead and put a box around our research and reports and finding legal resources. In the middle, towards the bottom, is a link to our Guide to Law Online that we'll be talking about. On the right-hand side, there's information about our hours and our address and our phone number, which we hope will be useful in the near future. In the meantime, as we've said, all questions should come in through Ask a Librarian. And there's also a little link to Ask a Librarian right under our hours as well. We like to populate that on our pages to make sure people find it easily. Yeah, Barbara has just included the link to Ask in the chat. Thank you, Barbara. So as we scroll down the homepage, there's some additional material there. On the right-hand side, you'll see the Legal Research Institute webinars and trainings. You can link on that for our information on our classes. There is a Read More section for our legal reports, and some legal reports are listed there. And then at the very bottom, we have a link to our databases, our legal databases. And we're going to start with that and look at some of the information available about our legal databases and resources. So this is the page that you open up to, and it organizes it organizes the research by general topic. So we have general legal resources, we have legislative and statutory resources, foreign law, legal periodicals and indexes, treaties, always an important item, and then regulatory information. Each entry for a database will include information about coverage, and it will also let you know whether or not it is a subscription database or something that is freely accessible outside of the library. So here we take a look at the beginning of the legislative and statutory resources that are available. And you see the first item is American State Papers, 1789 to 1838. It provides information about what American State Papers covers, and it also lets you know that it's free access. You're going to be able to just click on the link and go directly to the resource. The first, I think, 4 items listed here, so American State Papers, the Avalon Project, Congress.gov, and the Congressional Record are all free access resources. It's not till we hit the 5th item that we see something that flags as on-site access only. So this is one of the library's subscription databases, and you must be on-site to access it. The databases and eResources provides information about American law, indigenous legal material, foreign and comparative, and international law. And these are some items you're going to find in this list of resources. The Guide to Law Online is a portal that the Law Library has hosted for, I want to say, about 15 years at least, no more than 15 years, almost close to 20. It is a legal portal, includes over 9,000 links, and it's an annotated compilation of internet links that are organized by jurisdiction, and then within jurisdiction by topic. The guide itself breaks down into multinational, international, U.S. and state materials, and it will provide links to the full text of law, regulations, and cases, as well as links to legal commentaries. The guide is a fantastic resource. We're going to take a look at it. So here is the front page. There is a link to it from the Law Library's homepage, but here is the front page for the Guide to Law Online, and you'll see in the box you can select a link to international and multinational nations of the world, U.S. federal, U.S. states and territories, which is one we use frequently, the Indigenous Law portal, and then the Guide Index, which can be helpful if you're not sure where something is. States and territories and nations are the ones I probably use most frequently. And here we go ahead and we have a sample page for the state of Virginia. Each page is organized with the same headings, so Constitution, Executive, Judicial, Legislative, Legal Guides, and General Sources. You may be saying to yourself, well, I can just do a Google search and find this information. And it's true, you can. But you won't always find the most authoritative version of a particular resource, which is why we recommend the Guide to Law Online, and we use it ourselves. I had a question today about California law. I went to the Guide to Law Online to get the link to the California Code. It's faster and it's more reliable. And one of my examples over the years has been years ago, I found a portion of the California Motorcycle Code up online. It looked very authoritative. It had some useful information. But when I dug around a little, I found it was the pet project of a person who was terribly interested in certain aspects of California law regarding motorcycles. So he had put up the material that was of interest to him. He didn't necessarily update it in a systematic way, and you have to update legal materials on a regular basis. And he'd also included those sections that were of interest to him. But when you Googled, he came up very high, and it was a good-looking resource. The problem was it was limited. And that's why we really push you to use the Guide to Law Online, because essentially we've gone ahead and checked to make sure we're giving you a link to the best version of a state code, which are going to be the state laws, or the state constitution, or the state executive, which will be the governor's office and various state departments. So the Guide to Law Online can really help you. And of course, if you're looking for information on nations of the world or international materials, it's going to, without question, take a lot of the work out of your looking for something and trying to determine whether or not it's a reliable resource. So I like it, I use it, I recommend it. It's one of our most long-lasting resources. And we are currently converting it to research guides, which I'll touch on shortly. At this point, we were actually just, if you go to a guide page and has become a research guide, it'll just link you over. The same information will be available. It just appears a little differently. One of the advantages to research guides, though, being that we're able to update them more easily. Currently, we have to go through a couple of steps to update in the older guide. So we have a number of different research and reports that are available on the website, as you recall from the homepage. Those research and reports links on the left-hand side of the website, the homepage. And they provide information on commemorative observances for selected national observances and commemorative months. There's also links to digitized material, including the Federal Register, which publishes the regulations of U.S. agencies, as well as agency notices and presidential proclamations and executive orders. The United States statutes at large, which are the public and private laws of the United States published in chronological order. 1951 forward is going to be available on the Government Publishing Office's website, and we include a link to that. The United States Code, which is the subject organization of the laws of the United States, and a link to U.S. treaties, 1776 to 1949. I happen to know we're working very hard on getting later treaty material prepared and ready to add to the website as well, so we're looking forward to that later this year. And then American Indian constitutions and legal materials. We also have a number of legal research guides which provide information, for example, on how to do research in certain areas or with specific parts of our collections. So here is a link, here's a snapshot of the page with links to commemorative observances, digitized material, legal reports, the Guide to Law Online, and guides to our collection. And we talked some about the commemorative observances and digitized materials in particularly, but we're going to take a minute here and talk about one of our special collections, which are the Supreme Court records and briefs. And there are 10 Supreme Court depository libraries in the country. They are scattered across the country to allow for geographical breadth. The Law Library is a Supreme Court depository, which means we receive print copies of the records and briefs filed in the U.S. Supreme Court. We make these available in print for more recent cases. For older cases, 1913 to 2010, you want to request a copy through the online catalog. And for cases from 1832 to 1912, you want to make a request for the microform. And that would be a request you would make at the reference desk. The microform is in a room within the reading room itself. We have a special section for microform, and you're going to be able to request cases from the 19th century and early 20th century in the microform. We have different formats, and we use formats, microform, particularly for 19th century material, because the paper is going to be in such poor condition. However, if the microform version is not readable or doesn't provide the information, we do check the paper, but we do ask that patrons go ahead and look for earlier material in microform first. So one of the advantages of being down the street from the Supreme Court is that we are able to go down and check for copies of records and briefs that we didn't receive from the court. So if there's something missing or something that's been overlooked, we'll be able to go ahead and go down and check for copies of those records. One of our digitized collections that we didn't touch on are the U.S. reports, which are actually the decisions of the Supreme Court. And this is one of our digitized collections that we put up 3 or 4 years ago. You can search the collection, and you have options about browsing by volume, authoring justice, which is sometimes very popular for people doing research on a particular justice, and also by major case topic. And you'll go ahead and see those browse options at the bottom of the page here. And as I said, the U.S. reports is also fully searchable. You have a snapshot here of the search we did for the case Dred Scott. As you see, it came up, Dred Scott versus Sanford. That was the case itself. And then you go ahead and see a case below it. This is a case that will have mentioned Dred Scott. So you're able to do a search for a case by name in the U.S. reports. I'd already mentioned research guides briefly. Research guides are a newer product of the library. Barbara, I want to say 2 years we've been doing research guides, 2.5.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. And there is a page for research guides on the library. We're going ahead and moving various of our legal research guides into research, and we're taking material from our blogs. As I mentioned, we're also turning some of our Guide to Law Online pages into research guides, but you can use the Guide to Law Online at this time. And if a page has been moved into a research guide, it's just going to seamlessly take you over there. I happen to be, as I said, looking up something in California this morning. The California Guide to Law Online page is now a research guide, and I'm just able to link over. It's formatted a little differently, but the information is the same. If anything, it's perhaps a little richer. So we've moved over information on on our Supreme Court records and briefs collection about how to find case law online. Compiling a federal legislative history is always a helpful one and includes information about the different elements of a legislative history, including congressional committee reports, hearings, congressional record, bills, laws, so forth and so on. We also have a research guide on legal drafting, and we continue to add, I think on a monthly basis, if not more frequently. So we add research guides to the law library constantly. If you go to the research guide page for the library, you can either look by subject or you can look by research center. So if you want to see the guides that the law library has produced, just choose the option for research center. And here we've got a snapshot of that page. So you see by subject, all guides, and at the very top, can I see this? Yeah. So we're looking at, we've already gone down in this snapshot, and we're looking at the research guides for the law library itself. And you see a list with information. Some notes, you can do keyword searching, browse by subject, scroll through a list of guides. The library has produced so many guides at this point, I'm going to advise using a keyword or a browse by subject. If you were to go through all the library's guides, you would take considerable time, although there's some great and interesting information there. So we've talked some about the resources related to U.S. law, but now let's go ahead and look at the products that are produced by the Foreign Law Specialist. One are the current legal topics, and the other is the Global Legal Monitor. The current legal topics includes current international issues with in-depth legal commentary and comparison of international laws and bibliographic resources. The Global Legal Monitor is a daily publication. It provides information on breaking legal news across the world. It's updated. There's a publication at least 3 or 4 times a week, if not every day. There are a number of different ways to search it, as you can see by topic, country, keyword, author, and date. It has persistent URLs, and you can also sign up for RSS feeds for the Global Legal Monitor, which can be useful if you want to know about developing issues across the world. Here is a snapshot of the front page for current legal topics. We go ahead and organize the reports by general topics, and you'll see several reports under any one particular topic. It's a little hard to see here, I'm sorry. The first one is what is it? Adoption, custody, and parentage, then aeronautics and space, armed forces, banking and finance. On the other hand, you've got taxation and corporations, which is always one of interest to people in the business world, for example, and then also treaties and international agreements. Here is an example of one of the reports that's on a right to peaceful assembly selected foreign jurisdictions. I'm going to take this moment to say the jurisdictions that are covered in a report are the jurisdictions that the requester, Congress or Congressional Committee, asked us to cover. They are not the jurisdictions that we choose. We don't, get a request, oh, look into this and pick the jurisdictions. There will be specific jurisdictions that we've been asked to do the research on. These information on this topic and this jurisdiction may be updated through the Global Legal Monitor at a later date if there's been a change to the law in these areas, but we would not necessarily, for example, do a report on other countries unless there was a request on the right to peaceful assembly. As you can see in the report, it's organized by country. This is only 6, so you can probably scroll through it, but it can still be useful to use these headings to navigate, and we do have reports that have up to 125 plus countries in them, so really being able to link specifically to a country and then link back to the top is very useful. These reports also include endnotes, so you're going to see links to those that will appear at the bottom of the report, and they will provide supporting bibliographic references for the law and the interpretation of the law that appears in these reports. Here is a Global Legal Monitor article. As you can see, it's much shorter. It's on a much narrower topic. In this case, it's about a development in the Swedish Supreme Court, which is no longer going to receive or send communications via telefax. And there's some information, again, with links to the communications from the court. I will make a note that if there is an English language link, the author will go ahead and put that in, but if the link is only in the language of the country, it will be included. We do not do translations. I had meant to say that earlier. We are happy to help people find information on the laws of different countries, but if there is not an English language version, we are not able to do translations for that person. But the Global Legal Monitor is really helpful because it is English language articles about developments in the countries across the world. And as I mentioned, these are short. The specialist will be using sources of information, particularly news sources and legal news sources for the countries, for the jurisdiction for which they're responsible. So it's going to be more than you might find in any of the major papers in the United States, and information about a variety of topics. This one, we may not be so interested in unless we have a case in Sweden, but you may be more interested in a case on taxation in Japan if you had a business, import or export. And so here you can see some of the different options for searching Global Legal Monitor by topic, by country, by keyword. You can do an author search. But for example, Nicole Atwell, who is the third author here, was the former French specialist and has now been replaced by someone else. So if you were to look at her product, it would cease at a certain point, and you might think no one was writing about French topics. You can also do a date search as well. And as you can see, you can sign up for a GLM, RSS feed, and alert. So something I like very much about GLM. So if you want to follow information on developments in particular countries, you can go ahead and sign up in GLM. We do articles about developments in the United States in GLM, but not many. Many of those are going to be published through the blog or another resource, research guide perhaps, but you will find some articles about developments in the United States through the Global Legal Monitor. So I just mentioned the blog. The blog is over 10 years old. We actually celebrated its 10th anniversary this past August. We were very pleased. We try to publish 3 or 4 times a week. The post will include information about new research guides, international law developments, which are written by our foreign legal specialists, and these may include an in-depth blog about a particular development. We've had some really interesting ones about countries that have moved entirely online for their laws, New Zealand and Australia being one country. There may also be articles about new current legal topic reports, so the blog is a good way to publicize that information. Current legal trends, legal history and arcania. I believe, in fact, today's post is a bit of a legal history and arcania about 15th century manuscripts. I didn't have a chance to read it, but I did see a little email blurb about it. And also, it is a place where we provide information about additions and changes and enhancements to Congress.gov. So the blog is a really good place to go for information about Congress.gov. I think I said much earlier in presentation, the blog is a good resource for any of you who have students who will be doing National History Day. We go ahead and write about all sorts of historical events. And the nice thing about the blog is that we tried to include links to free resources, laws, articles, pictures associated with that particular event. Back in 2012, the library's blogs, in fact, not just the law library, but all the library's blogs coordinated to do posts in the centennial of the sinking of the Titanic. and one of our specialists wrote about the hearings that had taken place in the UK and the United States after the tragedy, concentrating on changing laws to do with safety for vessels like the Titanic. And it included links to the various hearings that were available at that time. So I like the blog a great deal. One caution, however, is that we have been publishing for so long, though we try to avoid link rot, we will have links that no longer work, and unfortunately we cannot go back and always fix those. Legal Research Institute, well, that is a website that we put together, I want to say, last year. Really happy about it. It provides information about our different webinars, the U.S. law webinars, the foreign comparative and international webinars, on-site classes, and online resources. Barbara has just provided a direct link to that page, and it's actually probably where a number of you found information about this particular webinar. But I have to advise it. It's really nice. It also includes links to recordings of past webinars, so you can find those there as well if you were not able to attend a particular webinar. We're going to finish by talking about Congress.gov. Congress.gov is our legislative website. It is a successor to the old Thomas product. We retired Thomas in 2000. Well, we began to retire Thomas in 2012. That's when we brought Congress.gov in on beta. We ran both systems together for a while, but for a number of years, Congress.gov has been the library's legislative database. It has information including bill text from 1989 to the present, PDF from 1993, bill summaries 1973 to the present, the congressional record from 1995 to the present in PDF. We actually need to update that. We've added volumes of the bound congressional record to Congress.gov, and those now go back to 1957. So you're able to search in the record back to 1957. We also have congressional committee reports going back to 1995, and we have member profiles back to 1973. For the most detailed information about coverage in Congress.gov, there is a link, Congress.gov, about coverage dates. This page will also, in the footnotes, provide information about how frequently different collections are updated. So, for example, footnote 1 lets us know that it takes at least 5 business days for us to receive bill text from the Senate. And I want to say Congress.gov is a legislative website, but we are not creating the content. We receive the content from the House, the Senate, the Government Publishing Office. We work in coordination with these, with the House, the Senate, the Government Publishing Office, and library technical staff, as well as staff across the library, to populate Congress.gov and provide metadata and to provide enhancements and updates. But we ourselves are not creating that content. So you can find it helpful to check the coverage information, not just to understand that we have bill text from 1989 to the present, but if you're looking for a bill, you heard it was introduced yesterday, it may not yet appear on Congress.gov. As well as being a resource with legislative materials, there are a number of additional features, including a link to the annotated Constitution, which is the Constitution with historical notes, and also information on Supreme Court cases that have interpreted the Constitution. CRS reports, which are now publicly available. There is a link from Congress.gov. Resources A to Z, which includes a legislative glossary, which can often be very helpful. A link to some of the founding documents, which will include the Declaration, as well as, I believe, a link to the Federalist Papers. There is a whole section on search tools. There are a number of different ways to search in Congress.gov, including a basic search, an advanced search that is pre-populated, but you also are able to create your own query. And then there's an option for a search where you can search different elements doing Boolean and nots. It's actually kind of a fun place to play around. One of the enhancements to Congress.gov over Thomas is that users can now set up an account, and using the account, they can set up alerts. The alerts can be for searches they've created. They can save the search, and anytime there is an update to that search, they'll get an alert. They can get an alert for members of Congress who, when they sponsor or co-sponsor legislation. You can also sign up for alerts on legislation. The alerts on the legislation will only be for legislation in the current Congress, because legislation in a previous Congress is dead. No further actions can be taken on it unless it's become a law in that Congress. And you can finally sign up for updates to the congressional record. You will have some options when you sign up for various of these alerts. For example, you may want information on legislation sponsored by a member, but not necessarily on co-sponsoring. So you'll be able to make some choices when you sign up for alerts. And here is a snapshot of the Congress.gov page. Search Tools has its own little section here on the upper right-hand corner beside the box that is highlighted as support. The A to Z resources are found under support. The help pages are also found under support. And right beside it is the sign-on when you have a Congress.gov account. If you don't, you can use the sign-in to create a Congress.gov account. We have some, you've got your search box, some helpful lists right below that, some current legislative activities, House and Senate. If we go down here towards the middle, we see our links to CRS reports and the annotated Constitution, which we touched on. And here's a snapshot that provides some information about actually searching in Congress.gov. The default is for the current Congress. It's going to ask you whether you want to search just for legislation or for all materials. Generally, we suggest just legislation. What you'll do is get a page up with a bill, and there will be links on that page for the congressional record, to roll call votes, and to any reports associated with that bill. So you'll be able to see that in the bill overview and also in tabs that appear before the bill overview. But you can search by bill number, short title, or keyword. One of the nice things that you also have an option of with Congress.gov is, say you do a keyword search and you get back a lot of results. You will have filters on the left-hand side of the page that allow you to narrow that search, but you're also able to search within a search. So that was one of the features we were able to add that can often be very nice. You create a search, and then you want to narrow it, and you can search within that search. So it's one of the nice enhancements we were able to add to the website. We mentioned the founding documents. So this is a page with some of the founding documents. It links over to our Old Century of Lawmaking website. That content is going to be migrated into Congress.gov over the next several years, but until all content is migrated, Century will continue to be standalone. And it provides links to the American State Papers, for example, which are the early reports and documents that Congress produced when they were considering legislation. You also have a link to the text of the Constitution, and that's going to be over in just the Constitution itself, a link to the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and also one to the Federalist Papers. So those are useful documents that you can use, or your student who is doing American history can link there. And one of the nice things is we've digitized from copies, the original, so that you get a nice look. It's not just a HTML PDF text, it's a look at the page as it was published. And here is a snapshot of Century. It includes materials like the Journals of the Continental Congress. I have to be honest and say I'm not sure those are available anywhere else online. possibly unhappy trust, but the journals of the Continental Congress are not widely available online. We have letters of the delegates, Eliot's debates in France records. These are in relation to the Constitutional Convention of 1787 and the debates associated with the passage of the Constitution, statutes at large, which are the laws in chronological order, the American state papers, and the U.S. serial set. The state papers is the predecessor to the serial set, and the serial set is the reports and documents that congressional committees produce in relation to legislation. The library is actually working on a project with the Government Publishing Office to digitize all the serial set materials. And then we have the House journals. Again, House journals are not widely digitized or available, so for historic research, those are here on Century. And then finally, we have the Congressional Record and its predecessors. Another nice thing about Century is if you click on the option Annals of Congress, it will tell you what it is, the dates it covered, and the resources it relied on for primary information. So questions? Well, ask a librarian, ask a librarian, ask a librarian. We are happy to get questions and provide information and help you find resources. We hope you've enjoyed the presentation. Barbara, I think, is going to take over from me in a second and go ahead and make the PowerPoint available as a WebEx download. And I'm going to go back and look to see if there are any. Yeah, here we go with the file transfer. Barbara has provided a number of links as well throughout the presentation. Thank you so much, Barbara. And I'm going to look to see if I see any questions that we haven't otherwise covered. Okay, we did get a question early on about weeding out material, and is this because law is based on precedent? Well, it depends on the material, but part of the reason we don't weed is that we see ourselves very much as a national library. So, for example, we are going to keep laws of countries that no longer exist. My example is the former Soviet republics. Because not only do people want to research current law, but they also want to research, scholarly, historic. They want information. The country itself, we have on occasion been contacted by a country that has not had copies or older copies of their laws, and we've been able to provide them. So it is a mix. Law is based on precedent, but very often, say if you're talking about U.S. law and you're going to talk about a book on U.S. constitutional law, that book is going to discuss the cases which are precedential. Certainly for U.S. law, we collect and we keep material. But for, we do it both because law is precedent, but also to provide material for people who are doing scholarly and historic research, and because we see ourselves very much as a national repository of this material. If we don't have it, it may be very hard to find elsewhere in the world. Okay, and Barbara has some instructions in the chat, which I will just read out. To download the PDF, please select the file from the list and click Download button. If you have any difficulties, just go ahead and send a request for the slides using Ask a Librarian form. And Barbara has just reminded me that we also ask that you complete the survey on your way out the door. And I'm also going to mention that you should be getting a copy of the recording of this webinar in the next day or two. The WebEx software goes ahead and generates that, and that will be sent to you. We have another question here about foreign law. As I mentioned, the foreign legal specialists are able to go ahead and collect those materials. They will be familiar with how the law is published in a particular country. We also have at the library I believe five overseas offices at this point. We are in contact with local publishers, both for legal and other materials, and we go ahead and constantly request by able in some cases to do an exchange of material with other countries. So there is a system set up to help us acquire the materials that we need. I mean, to be honest with you, we get, from various publishers, we get lists of publications, and then we go ahead and select those. We try to collect as broadly as we can, but we can't, as I mentioned, take and house everything.